Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my overview of Warhammer 40,000 Speed Freaks. So for those who want to cross, I do overviews on this channel. I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. That's the Steam refund window. There's usually a spiel that goes with that. Some games sit in the exception, like a free-to-play game. Obviously that's not refundable, but I still gave it 2 hours, gave it a red hot go. I also played a pre-release beta build a year ago of this, and I remember being very impressed, though it doesn't take a lot to impress me. I already like Warhammer 40k, and I'm an orc nut, so anything that puts the orcs front and center works for me. And it certainly doesn't help that beside all of that, this game's a really fun romp. But honestly, apart from leading with me saying I really enjoyed this, you can go and check it out. It's out now, it's free to play, it's early access, but there's still a fun game in there. Essentially, it's a PvP, action heavy, team deathmatch in rumble cars, right? There's a couple of different cars that you can pick from. You don't have them all unlocked at the beginning, but I've kind of unlocked most of them anyway in the first 2 hours. There's battle passes and all sorts of store-bought crap, but I think it's all cosmetic. It hasn't really affected me in any way. I'm not really susceptible to microtransactions. The game's either good or it isn't without having to pay extra, and this game is great. So there's two modes. There's what I would probably say is your standard main mode, which is the one that we played in the pre-release, but then there's also this sort of Dreadnought escort. You've got these giant Titan robots on either team that both teams are escorting. It's a little bit more cerebral because there's kind of a bomb that you have to run into, pick up, and drive into their walker. And if you do it on your own, you're pretty much stuffed. So the game falls into this rhythm, which is cool to see, between the bots filling the empty slots and, the kind of hive mind, low IQ players, because this isn't exactly the most mentally strenuous game. You do start to gravitate around the bomb dude and do a push together, and then either that detonates on the robot or it gets dropped and then they pick up the bomb and they do it again. So it's this collect together and surge, and it was really quite cool. But I would probably say the matches are a bit long in the teeth. They go for a lot longer, and the other mode's going to be the main draw, which plays out as everybody races to a capture point, like a neutral capture point. You want to get there and take it over, and then you just beat the crap out of each other until, I think it might be a predetermined time, at which point whoever owns the point gets more points per kill. So I think it's 15 if you own the cap point and 10 if you don't. I'd be curious what the long tail on that is, because to me, saying that out loud, that actually sounds like a pretty broken gameplay loop, like an incredibly heavy positive feedback loop that favors the winners. But like I said, at first blush, it seems to be a lot of fun, and it's free, so I'm willing to kind of just give it a little bit of rope there. But yeah, and then after that, you race to the next point. You do that 4 or 5 times, and then there's a finish line race as well. But ultimately, apart from those sporadic bursts where you try and get to a checkpoint, it's just a team-based biff around a kind of central area that you're trying to control, but you don't strictly have to stay in it. You get a lot of cool interplay from the different vehicles and what they do. I actually got a lot of value out of the sort of healing buggy, mostly because no one else used it, and it's very powerful. But each car will have a nitro boost and a couple of abilities. Generally speaking, there's more of a racial ability. The smaller, fast cars will have a mouse direction boost, which is really quite cool and handy. So yeah, you're driving around with WASD like normal, but if you hit this F button, wherever you're looking, you'll boost towards it. It's wild, it's comical, it's fun. It looks dumb, but who cares? It's a good mechanic. And it can make you do some pretty wild stuff, closing the gap on allies if you're healing them, trying to do a 180 on people chasing you. It really adds a bit of variety. The bigger, more lumbering tank-like vehicles will have a repair instead, and they're much slower. But positioning and all the different interplay is way more realized than I think you might kind of expect. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge orc fan, but the idea of an orc-only 40k game, you probably go in with your concerns. But yeah, safe to say they've actually really considered well how to balance a lot of the buggies and vehicles. The sort of starter default one is a very close range, get up in their faces, throw Molotovs. It's got this cool smoke trail that just obfuscates everything, and as someone, again, as I like orcs, I kind of revel in chaos a bit sometimes, and just blasting this smoke plume. It takes up so much space and it goes for so long. Oh, it's really quite disruptive, and I think that's great, and it's a cool little add. You know, you can, as you become a bit better and you realize some of the bigger tank type vehicles are vulnerable to little pokey jabby dudes, you know, dousing them in smoke and to protect them is actually viable. What else? I unlocked 2 of the big vehicles. One's like a looted Imperial tank, which I suppose you could probably say is mid-range. It's got its weaknesses. It really wants to favor its front arc, but it's essentially a gunboat, but has a horrible turning circle. So as long as you can bring that front arc to bear, you can obliterate anything. But if you start getting mobbed by little blokes, you're in trouble. There's another one, I don't know what it's called, like a grot ship thing. It's ship themed, and it has a front and back cannon that, to get the most value out of both of them, you kind of want a broadside, so that's cute. And it's got a shovel on the front where you can use that to lift dudes up in the air and fling them miles into the air, or you can slam it down to do massive damage. So that thing is literally a gunboat brawler type thing. And then something else I gave a go was more of like this laser gun long range sniper, so you sort of want to sit back from the capture point and the fight and drill these dudes with precise aim, and all of this is just cool and unusual, and I wouldn't expect it in a car, like a vehicular combat game. And you know, all the boosts and smashing into each other, so you can brawl and you can rumble, but you know, there's actually a lot more, dare I say, under the hood than you might actually realize at first blush. Anyway, I'm actually a really big fan. I'm curious where it goes. I'm curious what early access looks like for them. As we've covered, I'm quite skeptical of early access, to the point where I almost don't like covering it. This game feels fairly feature complete. They're running seasons, which, you know, I have reservations about doing if the game's not 1.0. So who knows, maybe it'll be a shorter early access because it feels pretty solid. Anyway, check it out for yourself. Otherwise, I might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.